My second grade teacher told us all, the whole class, that we had to take our papers home and get them signed, and that anyone who did not get their papers signed when they returned the next day would get a paddling. Anybody here remember when they used to paddle in schools? So, of course, that terrified me. I went home. The next morning, I'm sitting there at my desk, and my friend who sits across the aisle from me reaches in her notebook, and she pulls out this paper, and she says, "Did you get your paper signed last night?" And all of a sudden it dawns on me that, oh my gosh, I forgot to get my paper signed. I am going to get a paddling. So immediately, I developed this horrible stomach ache. And a few minutes later, I went up to the teacher and I told her how sick I was, and she said, "Go to the office and call for someone to come and pick you up and take you home." My grandparents were the ones that used to keep me when I was sick, because both of my parents worked. So my grandfather picked me up from school, and we went to their house, and my grandmother was fixing lunch. And so Pop and I began to play and have a good time. We were running through the house. We sat down and we ate lunch, and after lunch was over, he walked over to the couch in the den, and he sat down and he patted the couch beside him, and he said, "Come here, honey, sit down beside me for a minute. I want you to tell me why you really came home from school today." So I told him the story. I told him what had happened and what was going to happen to me. And he sat there and he listened, as he always did. And then he stood up and he walked over to this hat rack that was in the den there that had his hat and his coat. And he got his hat and he put it on his head and he said, "Come on, honey, get your coat on. We're going back to school." And I said, "Oh, no, we can't do that." And he said, "Yeah, we can, and we are, because you're going back to school and you're going to tell your teacher that you lied to her." Is anybody here feeling my pain? So I said, "I'll be in double trouble. If we go back to school and I tell her that I lied, then I'm going to get 2 spankings instead of 1. And he said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Did you get your paper signed last night?" And I said, "No." And he said, "And did you tell your teacher a lie?" "Yes." He said, "You know, honey, the paddling will hurt. It'll hurt for a few minutes. But if I don't make you go back today, that lesson that I'll be teaching you will hurt you for the rest of your life." I learned a hard lesson about integrity that day. By the way, we went back and the teacher just laughed. I didn't get a spanking. But I learned a hard lesson that day about integrity and what it really means. And I learned something else that day too. I learned if I was ever going to lie again, I would not tell my grandfather.